Okay, hello, good evening. How are you? Awesome. Thank you for being here. I'm super excited to be talking about two things that I love a lot. One is Unity, the other one is programming in Visual Studio. So, welcome. First, I would like to ask you who is a programmer? Okay, cool. You guys are more like artists, designers. Okay, cool. So I hope you find this interesting, and if by the end of the day you become a programmer because you like the tools, I will be super, super happy. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Unity and Visual Studio and how we are together making better tools for you, the developers, right? Because what we want you to make is to innovate, to create new experiences, to create new games, new stories, and not to recreate an engine or to create an idea or stuff like that. So that's our ultimate goal. My name is Arturo. I'm a technical evangelist at Unity Technologies. That's my Twitter account, my email account. If you ever need anything from Unity, you can send me an email and I will be happy to respond to you. Also, I will be around the rest of the day, so feel free to talk to me afterwards. So I'm going to start with a quick demo. This is a demo called The Book of the Dead. This is a demo rendered in Unity in real time. All that you're going to see here was captured within the Unity editor.
Well, look at that. I didn't think you had it in you.
Tell me more about this place. You spent nearly 90 years there.
What? No. No, not there. The forest is just the lobby. That's where the entrance is. I've been thinking, how do I remember all this? When did I make these memories? You need a brain to make memories.
Your brain is now remembering things that never happened to you. Or to it. An enormous amount of neuron connections were formed since you came back. Decades worth of memory.
And there's one more thing you need to do.
Karen? Hey. Karen,
Yeah, sorry.
are you alright?
Yes, I'm just tired.
Tell me. Did you see any of the others?
Yes. I damn near fainted. Even though he had told me about them.
You think that was one of them?
I know.
Come on. You're almost there.
You're the only one who woke up, Karen. One out of tens of thousands.
Why?
Okay, so that was made with Unity within the engine. Do you think it looked good? So? Okay, so I'm going to show you real quick before jumping into the actual presentation, another quick demo. In this case, I'm going to show you a real executable file. So this is another made with Unity project called Adam. Have you seen this one? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to show it to you running in real time. It takes a couple of seconds to load because this is an executable. This is not a video as the previous one. I just want to show you the type of projects made with Unity and what we encourage you to achieve with a tool. This was a short film directed by the same director of District 9, Chappie. So if you've seen those movies, this was made by Oat Studio and directed by Neil Blomkamp. I'm not going to play
You want to know what you
the entire demo. In fact, I'm going to scroll through it, and I want to show you a couple of things. So this is not a video, and how we can see it's not a video. It's paused, but at the same time we see the simulation of the fog and all the smoke on back of there. Also, another thing that I can do is I can zoom out, and I can move the camera. So this is all real time. It's not pre-rendered. And this is the power of the tool that you can get if you are using Unity. Of course, this is part art, but also someone needed to program some effects, the interaction, etc. And that was done using C#, Visual Studio, and the tools that I'm going to talk about. So if you want to take a look at the demo, go to the Unity webpage, and we have the demo and stuff. So I just wanted to show you the power of real-time rendering. So back to the presentation. A bit about Visual Studio. You're a programmer, right? So you use Visual Studio already? Okay, all the time. So cool. For those of you who haven't used Visual Studio is an IDE. As a summary, when you are writing code, you need some sort of text editor, right? You could do it on Word if you want it, but maybe it's not the best tool to do that. And that's precisely what I'm going to be talking about one tool that allows you to make Unity games, Unity applications, without worrying about the tool, just using the tools. So Visual Studio is the most powerful IDE for game development with Unity, and this is not just because we're at the Microsoft booth, but it's because we actually work together with them to provide the cleanest workflow between Unity and Visual Studio. It's going to be the default IDE in Unity for Mac starting 2018. So yeah, if you have used Unity on the Mac and you still use MonoDevelop because there was no solution there, now there's Visual Studio for Mac, and the experience is the exact same one. The cool thing is that you will have consistency across operating systems. I usually work on a PC, but sometimes I need to deploy to iOS or anything, and I need to switch to a Mac. And I don't want to change my workflow, I don't want to change anything. I want just to use a different computer, but I still want to use the same tools. With Unity, it has always been like the same thing. Now with Visual Studio, I can take everything to my Mac and work the same way and have the same productivity. Also, debugging tools. You probably have made games and then sometimes you stumble upon some issues. You need to debug your programs, right? Usually people, when they start making games with Unity, we used to just set debug.log or print, and then you have your console full of text. The game also gets slower because you're creating lots of text and you're outputting all those things. So that's not necessarily, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So just for demo purposes, I'm going to be using sorry. This is a real game or a slice of a real game called Anti-Graviator, but Cybernetic Walrus. They allowed us to use their assets. So what I'm going to talk about right now is something from a real game, something from a real pipeline, something that people stumble upon from time to time. This is a kind of complex game it's a racing game. In this case, it's only single player, which might be not super exciting, but just bear with me in this case. Let me play it for a couple of seconds here. I'm using some Unity features, timeline, cinemachine. So actually making this intro scene, it doesn't require a lot of effort. All the tools are already there. And I can play around, move around. It looks cool. I have some post-processing effects, etc. Okay, all these things. So I just wanted you to know how this worked. Back to my presentation. Some features that are like common, that are on Visual Studio, and that allow you to make games faster and be happier. So IntelliSense, these are videos, so I will be playing them. It's a good way of creating code or writing code without having to learn the entire API. I don't know if you have good memory. I don't. So I don't know by heart the entire Unity API. So it's either going to my web browser and try to remember, oh, add force, that receives some parameters, but I don't remember. Then I go to my browser, or getting IntelliSense and getting the auto-completion. So I'm showing here how, as I'm typing, Visual Studio is telling me, oh, maybe you want to use this function. Let me show you the optional parameters you can use, etc. So this is really, really, really useful. Also, if I'm taking a look at my code, of course I don't have everything in one single large script, right? I have multiple scripts, function definitions in different files, and sometimes when I want to do specifics, not everything is on the same side. So with the Visual Studio and IntelliSense, I can simply tell, oh, I want to go to the definition of this file, and in this case I'm going to the actual definition. I'm opening the other file, the script, with the definition of that code. However, I can also get a sneak peek at the definition of that function. So I don't need to actually go to other script. I can just take a look right away. Here, I'm not opening the file, the entire file. I'm just taking a look at the definition of the code there, and then I can go back to my work. This is super useful. Once you start using these tools, and that happened to me, you start seeing like, okay, I really spend a lot of time just going back and forth between tabs, and this saves you a couple of, maybe a minute per day, but if you multiply that by the 5 days a week, you could use those 5 minutes in other more productive things. Colorization, that's also another thing. We were talking about using Word to program. Maybe it's not the best tool. You could be using the text styles tool to make the color, but I think it's better. Oh shit! Sorry. I said a bad word. So yeah, here's the color, the code colorization, and there's some stuff that at first you don't probably notice, but once you know like the codes for each color, then it makes your code more readable, right? In this case, I have 3 declarations of variables. I have a float, a transform, and a PID controller. Right away, I can see that, okay, if float or the variable has, the type of data has a specific name, that means it's a basic type. Or if it has another color, then it means it's a compound class, and it's easier to know, is this part of the engine, is this part of the stuff I'm doing, etc. So you gain a lot of things by using this. Another cool thing is the Unity-specific Solution Explorer. If I use another IDE to open my Unity project, I will get even references to my models, to my textures, to many things that I don't need in my coding environment. I just want to see scripts, I just want to see C# scripts, I just want the shaders. So the Unity-specific Solution Explorer allows me to have a view of my project, the view of the project I have open there, but just with the relevant information. So you can see here that on my project window, I have my models, I have textures, sounds, videos, etc. If I switch to Visual Studio and I go to the Project Explorer, I just get the scripts. I just get the shaders. So this is also a good improvement. I don't need to do anything to get just my scripts. It just works out of the box. In other IDEs, you need to go and find a plugin and then run a small service to make sure this works. In this case, it just works. So larger view of this thing. On the left, you see the Unity project window. On the right, you see the the Visual Studio Unity Project Explorer. And you see how you have the same folders, but you just see the relevant things there. Now, regarding debugging, and I think this is the most important part, most of our Unity users are not necessarily programmers or are not super experienced in debugging stuff, and it's important. As we get more complex programs, even people who are not necessarily like the engineer in charge of debugging or bug fixing, you need to know these tools. So with Visual Studio and Unity, you can do cool things, right? In this case, I'm running my game. This is the game I was showing you. And I noticed an issue with my game. I noticed that my player is cheating, right? Let's see what's happening. My player needs to pass by the goal 3 times, but somehow the player is cheating, right? So he just won, and his score is like 3 seconds or something. There's something wrong here. This example is probably too easy to spot, but let's see how we could fix, or not just fix, to detect how we could detect what's going on here. So let me play this one. I know that somehow something is happening once the player, the ship, triggers the goal here, right? The thing. So I know that I have a collider on my goal, and there's some code that tells Unity that triggers the event of the collision on the trigger enter. So I know there's something going on there. I need to inspect the values of the variables. We can see here that I have a couple. I have one condition checking. So something might be wrong there. The next thing I could do is add 3 lines of code saying debug.log, and then the value of is ready is, and then it will print the value, right? So I could do that, but then I will be adding some extra code that later I will need to take care of, and I don't want to add unnecessary code. So here I use the debugging features of Visual Studio. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I right-click on the code, and I add a breakpoint. This breakpoint will tell Visual Studio, once it's connected to Unity, will tell, okay, once you hit this line of code, once you execute this line of code, stop the execution, pause for a second, and let's inspect what's going on there. So that's what I did. In this case, I have already my breakpoint there. I'm going to tell from Visual Studio to run and connect to Unity. Right? Before doing this, the 2 programs are working in isolation. I need to attach Visual Studio to the Unity process, and it's just 1 click away. So in this case, I'm start testing my game. Looks like it crashed. It didn't crash. Visual Studio just got the message that it should stop, and we need to inspect what's going on there. So as you can see on the lower side here, for this specific function, I have the list of variables with their value. So instead of printing unnecessary messages and adding more complexity to my code, I'm actually inspecting what's the value of each of those variables at that time. I can go deeper. So in this case, I know the issue is there or might be there. I could go deeper. I could try to fix something else. For instance, I have this player completed lap function. I'm going there, and you see that I also have a plus equal 3. So there's another issue in my code, and I could spot it because I'm going through all the codes in my code, and finally I found what was the issue over there. So another cool thing, and we were talking about this previously, is that you have Visual Studio for Mac now. So the experience is the same. If I switch to Mac because I need to do something on iOS or whatever, I have my same files, I have the same experience across the 2 tools. I can do the same debugging, and it's pretty cool. I have auto-completion, the color coding, etc. So a couple of more goodies, and this shows how Unity and Microsoft are working together on giving better tools to you guys, is we are upgrading the Mono runtime version. So we have an experimental.NET version right now, but in 2018 it's coming out of experimental, so it's going to be fully featured. We will have C#6 features or equivalent features. You can even back up your project within Visual Studio. And this is pretty cool. You don't need to do any other thing. You will use Git for that. And if you don't want to add more software, let's say you add another client for backing up your project, you have that within Visual Studio. And there are a lot of collections to modify your experience of using Visual Studio. If you want to add a specific theme, a specific shortcut or whatever, you can do that. And there's a huge marketplace of where you can get these things from. So if you have any question, I will be here. If you want to know more about Unity, more about Microsoft related stuff, Visual Studio stuff, you can go to this website, and we have a lot of other presentations about the engine. Some of them are here, some of them are at the Unity office. If you want to visit the office, feel free to log in to this website, and we have the doors open, so it will be nice to have you. Thank you very much, and any other question you may have, feel free to ask me. Thank you.